Hi, I'm Althea. I was told by my own mother to take a break from family the morning my grandfather's will was read. They didn't forget to invite me. They just didn't want me there. When I showed up anyway, they called me a volunteer, misspelled my name on the documents, and gave every seat a label but mine. I sat quietly while they divided a legacy they thought I didn't notice. But what happens when the one they tried to cut out owns 43% of the company? And what do when silence is the loudest revenge of all? I pulled into the gravel parking lot about 20 minutes before the will reading. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that soaks into your clothes no matter how thick your coat is. I'd driven from Portland to Lake Oswego that morning, without a formal invite. The only reason I knew about the gathering was a vague email CC'd to me 2 days prior, sandwiched between notes about tax files and board updates. No greeting, no details, just a "see attached." As I stepped out of the car, I adjusted the hem of my navy dress and scanned the estate. It looked like something from a fundraising gala. White tents in the backyard, catered coffee, and small golden plaques designating where each family should sit. A young man with a headset approached me as I neared the patio. "You here with the catering team?" I blinked. "No, I'm Althea, Henry Wells' granddaughter." He stuttered, flipping through a tablet, his eyes darting down the list. "Right, of course. Sorry, Ms. Wells. Just head around back. They're about to start." Ms. Wells. Funny. The name sounded foreign on his tongue, as if I hadn't spent every Sunday of my childhood on that porch, drinking root beer, floats Grandpa made just for me. Inside the main tent, the seats were nearly full. A printed sign with bold lettering marked "Family Only" taped to the front row made my stomach twist. Every chair had a name card in fancy serif font. Verena sat between our mother Loretta and Uncle Ray. My name wasn't on any of the cards. Loretta didn't look up as I hovered near the chairs. Instead, she gave a brief wave with 2 fingers, motioning toward the very back. No smile, no acknowledgement. Just the kind of gesture you give a stranger asking if the seat next to you is taken. I sat down beside a space heater humming in the corner, trying not to feel like I'd just walked into someone else's memorial. My brother-in-law nodded at me, the kind of forced politeness that feels more like an obligation than kindness. No one else acknowledged I'd entered. It was like watching a movie of my own family, and realizing you weren't in the cast anymore. Then Verena spoke up, loud enough for those nearby to hear, but with that fake sweetness she'd mastered years ago. "Look who finally took a break from spreadsheets." Her laugh was crisp, rehearsed. Before I could reply, Loretta leaned over and added, "Maybe take a little break from all this family stuff too, honey. Might be good for you." I turned to look at her. She was smiling gently, as if she'd just recommended a yoga retreat, not quietly asking me to disappear. Her tone was so even, so civil, that for a moment I wasn't sure if I should be offended or grateful. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Every instinct told me if I pushed back, I'd be cast as dramatic, emotional. So I nodded, forcing a polite smile, and turned back toward the front. The attorney finally began the reading. Names rolled off his tongue like items on a spreadsheet. Verena received management rights. My cousin Ethan, the family lake house. Uncle Ray got residual rights to royalties from Grandpa's business patents. And me? Assets marked for Ali. Ali. Only one person ever called me that. Grandpa. It was his name for me when I was 6. But here, on legal paper, in a room full of suits and inheritance, it was a dismissal in disguise. The packet in my lap confirmed it. Ali Shipman, distribution pending review. As if I were a minor, as if I were an afterthought. I scanned the crowd. No one else flinched, not even Verena, who had signed off on the draft. She glanced at me for half a second, then looked back down at her phone. And that's when it hit me. They didn't forget me. They erased me. I sat there in silence while the others clapped, murmured approval, leaned in to hear the final details. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just stared at the paper in my hands and thought, "You think I'm just going to vanish? Again." They told me to take a break. They didn't know I would take everything with me when I left. I didn't leave that night because I was tired. I left because I finally understood. I wasn't family anymore. The reading of Grandpa's will continued while I sat still in the back. Every name the attorney read out came with an honorary title or formal role. To Verena, our eldest, longtime executive partner of Wells Holdings. To Uncle Ray, co-founder and patent holder. To Ethan, board liaison. When he got to me, there was a long pause. And to Allie Shipman, he said, tripping slightly on the name, designated as an administrative volunteer, distribution pending compliance, and final review. Allie, volunteer. The air shifted. A few people tilted their heads slightly, confused, but no one corrected him. Not my mother, not my sister, not a soul said a word. It was quiet, but my ears rang with the kind of humiliation that doesn't slap, it seeps. I hadn't heard anyone refer to me as Allie in over 20 years, and never in a legal document. That was Grandpa's name for me when I was still losing my baby teeth. In that room, it felt like a placeholder, like a reminder I wasn't part of the real lineup. Afterward, people stood to mingle, their movements practiced. I slipped outside for air. The cold cut into me, but it felt cleaner than the tent I'd just walked out of. I leaned on the porch railing, watching the wind rustle the lake beyond the tree line, thinking back to something that happened 3 months before Grandpa passed. I had asked Verena for access to the company's financial reports. As a certified financial analyst, I'd volunteered to assist during year-end filings. She'd smiled and said she'd get the team to loop me in. Weeks passed. Nothing. I followed up. Still nothing. When I asked again, she half laughed and said, "You're being overly sensitive, Althea. You don't even officially work in the business." Later, I discovered my work email had been labeled external in the system, automatically blocked from internal communications. Not a glitch, a deliberate classification. That moment used to confuse me. Standing outside now, the confusion was gone. Inside, someone turned on a projector. A slideshow began. Grandpa's life in photos, childhood in Idaho, his Navy service, the first draft of the company logo drawn on a napkin. Everyone clapped when their part came up. Verena in front of a boardroom screen, Ethan as a kid holding a patent plaque, even Uncle Ray with a cigar in the 80s. I waited for the slide where I'd show up. I waited through over 60 images. Nothing, not one picture of me. I leaned over and whispered to my brother, who'd shown up just in time for dessert. Was I ever in the frame? He shrugged. Maybe not in the version they printed. He said it casually, like it wasn't supposed to sting. I smiled back so he wouldn't feel awkward, but inside, something froze. I wasn't just being forgotten. I was being edited out. After the slideshow, Loretta found me near the side table. She placed a hand on my arm gently, like someone would to a guest who stayed just a little too long at a party. "It's been a long day," she said with a soft smile. "Maybe you should go home early. Get some rest." Her voice wasn't cold. It was tempered, the kind people used when they were done with you, but didn't want to sound cruel. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't have anything left to say. I grabbed my coat and walked toward the gravel lot, my heels crunching with each step. I didn't look back. They hadn't pushed me out all at once. They did it piece by piece, by marking me external, by printing my name wrong, by using a nickname I outgrew before I graduated high school, by making sure the slideshow told a story that didn't include me. They didn't scream or shove. They just moved the line slowly until I was on the other side of it, and now I finally saw it clearly. I kept the envelope in my desk for 2 years. The day I opened it, I stopped being their shadow. But before that day came, before everything burned down so neatly and so finally, I started remembering. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I first asked Verena for access to the performance reports. Grandpa had just come home from the hospital and things were fragile. I offered to help review the quarterly projections, my way of easing the load. We were in the conference room, sipping those awful office cappuccinos that taste like cardboard and regret. Verena smiled, that particular kind of smile she saves for clients and enemies. "Of course," she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I'll have Kyle loop you in by Friday." Friday came and went. So did the next one. I followed up, twice. Nothing. 3 weeks later, I asked again. This time she blinked, tilted her head, and said, "Oh, I thought you were just offering as a courtesy." "You're not technically on the payroll, right?" I said nothing. I just nodded. Months later, I found out my company email had been tagged as external in their firewall settings. Any message I sent was flagged and held, automatically, neatly, without fuss. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was removal, a professional deletion. And the worst part? They did it with the same tone they used to thank me for birthday cards and gluten-free pies. Quiet, smiling, practiced. I remembered another afternoon, this one less polite. It was early fall. Grandpa had asked me to stay behind after a family lunch. We were sitting out back, him in his weathered recliner, me on a folding chair. I told him I had an idea: digitize the family's charitable arm, build an online donor dashboard, clean up reporting, tie everything into the foundation's PR narrative. He loved it. He said it reminded him of the way he used to draw plans on the backs of gas station receipts. I spent 2 weeks building the pitch, made mock-ups, created a rollout timeline, drafted a budget. Then, 1 month later, I sat in a meeting and watched Verena deliver the exact same proposal, my fonts, my phrasing, even the sample mock-ups, except she'd replaced Wells' transparency project with the Brawley Bridge Initiative. She got a standing ovation. Afterwards, she walked by and said, "Thanks for planting the seed, Al." I didn't say a word. Not then. I still believed in the illusion that family wins together. Now I know better. They weren't borrowing my ideas. They were burying them, with her name on the headstone. I wish I could say that was the last time. But no. They got more creative. On Grandpa's 90th, we published a legacy book, a photo album with over 300 images from decades of company events, family trips, newspaper clippings, and personal notes. I was listed in the contributors list because I wrote the intro, paid the photographer, and arranged the final print. And when the books arrived, I flipped through eagerly, page after page, people smiling at conferences, fishing on the dock, cutting cake. Everyone was there. Cousins I hadn't seen in 5 years, ex-spouses, even interns from the internship program I started. Me? One photo. Back turned. Slightly out of frame. No caption. A week later, during a follow-up meeting, Verena introduced me to a potential investor as our silent partner. At the time, I took it as respect, as humility. Now, they didn't mean silent as in wise, they meant invisible. Later that winter, I went over to Grandpa's house, just the two of us. The TV was muted, a bowl of pistachios between us. At one point, he stood up, walked to his study, and came back with a sealed envelope. It was thick, labeled Wells, private backup. He handed it to me with both hands and said, "Don't open unless you have to, but if you do, trust your own signature." I stared at it for a long time. "What's in it?" I asked. He didn't answer, just smiled the way only people who know they're near the end can smile. Then he changed the subject to football. I didn't open it, not then, but I never forgot the weight of it, or the way he said trust. They thought they could write me out of the narrative. They edited me out of photos, filtered me out of systems, took my voice and fed it through their mouths. But he saw it coming. And that envelope, that was his way of writing me back in. After the crowd dispersed from the tent, I stayed behind for a few minutes, letting the chill bite through my jacket while I watched the staff clear away the name cards. Mine, of course, had never existed. I was heading toward my car, keys in hand, when I heard her heels behind me. Click, click, sharp and deliberate. "Althea," Verena called softly, just enough sugar in her voice to make me pause. I turned halfway, not enough to face her, just enough to acknowledge. She stepped beside me, hands folded like she was about to deliver a eulogy. "I thought we should talk. Just clear the air." I didn't answer, but I didn't walk away either. Verena glanced around as if to confirm no one else was listening. "You've been intense lately," she began. "A little, on edge. And Mom, she's worried. We just thought you might need space. Time. You know, to process everything." The way she said "we" made it sound official, like a vote had been taken. A boardroom decision on whether or not I was fit to be in the family. So that was it. Loretta's passive "get some rest" wasn't just a motherly suggestion. It was coordinated, premeditated. I kept my tone steady. Or maybe you just need space from accountability. Verena's expression didn't shift. She was trained for this. Smile through confrontation, pivot with grace. She reached out, brushing non-existent lint from her sleeve. We're all grieving, and you know how emotional you can get when— Say it, I cut in. Just say what you're trying not to say. She blinked, just once, but it was enough. You're not the only one with a stake in this family, she finally said, then offered a thin smile before stepping back. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. I watched her walk away. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees beyond the estate wall. I felt cold, but not from the air. Back home that night, I walked straight to my office. I didn't bother turning on the lights. The soft glow of the street lamp outside lit enough of the room to find what I was looking for. On the third shelf, in a folder labeled Wells Trust, Personal, was a copy of the donation tracking spreadsheet I'd once maintained for Grandpa. Years of entries, tax-deductible receipts, notes from conversations with him in the margins. Verena had taken it over 6 months before he passed. Said she was streamlining the process. When I asked to see the files again last quarter, she told me they'd been merged with another folder during system consolidation. That folder never reappeared. 3 months later, she unveiled a new philanthropic initiative, the Brawley Bridge Project. The same concept, same figures, even the same donor tiers I had created. I had the original, all of it, backed up, annotated, time-stamped. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at those files and thinking, they don't delete you by accident. They erase you on purpose and then ask why you're so sensitive when you notice. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk and removed the envelope Grandpa had given me. It was still sealed. My fingers hovered over the flap. Not yet. Instead, I placed it beside the file folder, lining them up like chess pieces. Don't save them if they forget you, he had said. I never understood what he meant. Until now. At midnight, after changing into sweatpants and tying my hair back, I sat down at my computer, opened a new draft in my email. To Natalie Ross, my attorney. Subject, contingency activation, pre-review. Only attached, digital copy of the stock transfer form Grandpa and I had signed at the bank 2 years ago. It gave me discretionary rights under a clause I never told anyone I knew about. He had insisted I be listed as a fallback trustee, in case the others forgot how to behave. I CC'd the corporate oversight account and legal archives, then I stared at the send button. I didn't click it, not yet. I saved it to drafts, shut my laptop, and leaned back in my chair. No one had raised their voice yet, but I had just drawn the first sword. Before I opened the envelope, I sent one message, not to the family, but to the bank. I barely slept that night, not because I was restless, but because I was ready. After saving the email draft to my attorney, I sat alone in my office, staring at the envelope Grandpa had handed me 2 years ago. It sat on the edge of my desk like it had waited patiently, knowing it would matter more now than it ever could have then. I took a deep breath, cracked the seal, and unfolded the papers inside. There it was, a notarized document signed by Henry Wells himself, dated 24 months ago, transferring 43% of the company's voting shares to me, not Verena, not Uncle Ray, me. A post-it stuck to the top in Grandpa's neat handwriting read, "This is not a gift, it's a safeguard." It didn't feel like a surprise. It felt like confirmation. He had seen it all coming. Maybe not the tactics, but the erosion of truth, the way the family could turn, slowly, silently. He'd known. That was why he prepared this. I didn't cry. I didn't feel joy either. Just a calm clarity washing over me, like the morning tide slowly claiming the shore. That calm didn't last long, because sitting on my kitchen counter, under a pile of unopened mail, was a letter I'd nearly thrown out a few weeks ago, marked from a financial institution I'd never worked with. It was a notice about a business loan, $180,000, filed under my Social Security number. I never took a loan. I'd never even heard of that bank. I tore open the rest of the envelope, scanning each page. The paperwork claimed I had authorized the loan as a co-owner of the company. The signature wasn't mine, but it looked close. Verena's team had access to old onboarding files, ones where I'd signed years ago in meetings, helping Grandpa with logistics. They'd lifted it from somewhere. They used me. They didn't just edge me out of the story, they forged me into a liability. The loan had been used as collateral for a company vehicle lease and a secondary investment into branding revamp. That revamp was Verena's rebranding initiative, the same one that erased Grandpa's name from all public-facing materials and replaced it with some sleek, minimalistic design with a tagline, "Future First, Family Second." I remembered staring at that rebrand and thinking it was soulless. Now I knew why. Because they'd built it with stolen weight. My name, my ID, my silence. I returned to my desk, scanned the stock certificate, Grandpa's note, the loan documents, and attached them all to the email draft I had saved earlier. I added one more line. Execution of beneficiary authority. Immediate freeze. Then I hit send. The moment the email disappeared from my outbox, I didn't feel nervous. I felt awake, like something dormant inside me had flicked on. I closed the laptop, exhaled, sat still, and waited. The first ripple hit before 9 a.m. Loretta called me 3 times in a row. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:27, my phone buzzed with a text from a former board member. "Did you really freeze the trust?" I replied with a single period. Then, at 10:12, Verena's name appeared on my screen. I watched it ring, didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I didn't listen. I already knew the tone. I poured myself coffee, slow and steady, and opened my banking app, not to check balances, but to confirm the hold on all company-affiliated accounts had taken effect. They had. Later that morning, as I rinsed out my mug, I imagined Loretta at the checkout counter, trying to pay for lunch with the business card, the swipe failing, her confusion, her delay, the moment her stomach flipped. I imagined Verena answering a call from the company's bank manager, hearing the phrase she never expected. "Your co-owner has activated authority. The accounts are frozen." They had spent so long deleting me from the narrative. They forgot I still had the pen. They took my name off the invitation list. I took theirs off the payroll. At precisely 12:43 p.m., in a sleek white linen restaurant off 23rd Avenue, Loretta's credit card was declined. She and Verena had taken themselves to lunch, nothing extravagant, just celebratory, a toast to the successful recentering of the Wells family brand, as Verena put it. The salmon was overcooked, but the Chardonnay was crisp, and Loretta had just started her second glass when the check arrived. The server returned holding the black leather folder with both hands, looking a bit too apologetic for someone in his early 20s. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, loud enough for the next table to turn. "Do you have another card? This one's not going through." Loretta's smile faltered. "That's odd. It's the company card." Verena reached for her purse as Loretta rummaged in hers, her hand suddenly less steady. The server waited, unfazed. "I'll cover it," Verena said coolly, though her eyes were already scanning her phone. 6 notifications from the bank. They didn't talk much on the drive back. The silence sat between them like a third passenger. Verena finally broke it, not looking up from her screen. "She pulled the funds," she said, like she was diagnosing a mechanical failure. Loretta turned to her, brows furrowed. "You mean, she froze it?" Verena didn't respond. She didn't have to. Back at the office, Verena's inbox had already begun to flood. One email in particular caught her eye. Subject: Beneficiary Action, Form 1083 Authority Executed. The message was brief. "Your co-owner, Ms. Althea Shipman, has exercised discretionary authority in accordance with the stipulations outlined in Form 1083. The financial institution is in full compliance and all corporate access accounts are temporarily on administrative hold." She sat motionless for a moment, then muttered, "She played that card." Within 15 minutes, a board member called. Then another. By 4 p.m., a Zoom meeting had been scheduled, unscheduled, then demanded again by someone in compliance. "Why wasn't this discussed with her?" a partner asked, voice clipped. Verena, barely holding her mask, replied, "She was never involved in any of this." From my end, I watched it all unfold like a chess game I'd rehearsed for years. I didn't need to argue with anyone. The paper trail spoke in clearer language than I ever could. No, I wasn't involved, I said to myself. And now they know what that costs. The next morning, I woke up to a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls stacked like dominoes. Loretta, 6, Verena, 9. Even Ethan, who barely acknowledged me at family functions, had sent a text. "What did you do? They're freaking out." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a clean PDF copy of the notarized stock transfer Grandpa had signed and attached it to an email. The subject line was simple: "In case you misplaced this." I sent it to the general company inbox, CC'd the board, and closed my laptop. I didn't scroll social media, didn't refresh my inbox. I cleaned the kitchen, vacuumed the rugs, mopped the floor. Not because it needed it, but because I needed the stillness. I needed to remind myself that you don't always win by shouting louder. Sometimes you win by being the one who doesn't blink. I went to the bookshelf and pulled down the frame I'd kept half hidden behind a row of hardbacks, an old photo of Grandpa and me. He was seated on the porch swing, holding a lemonade, one arm casually thrown around me while I held a messy stack of folders. On the back, he'd written in pen, "She always knew the numbers better than anyone else." I placed the photo on my desk, next to my coffee, centered it. "He trusted me to hold the line," I whispered. "Let them call, let them squirm, let them sweat. I was just getting started." When the second account froze, Verena didn't call the bank. She called me. The call came just after 10 p.m. while I was brushing my teeth. The screen lit up with Verena's name, her face staring back at me through the tiny video preview. I let it ring until the last vibration faded. It rang again. I answered, not out of courtesy, but curiosity. "We need to talk," she said, skipping pleasantries. Her voice was tighter than usual, less polished. Her hair was slightly undone, like she hadn't expected to be on camera tonight. "I assumed you'd call the bank," I said evenly, wiping my hands on a towel. She ignored that. "You froze the accounts. That's not how family operates." There it was, the line she had prepared, spoken like a prosecutor, not a sister. I stared at the camera for a beat before answering. "Exactly. That's why I did it." She flinched, just a fraction, then leaned closer to the screen. "You're not thinking long-term, Althea. You've made this personal." "No," I said, calm as stone. "You did?" "When you turned my name into a financial loophole." She started to say something else, maybe another threat masked as a lecture, but I ended the call mid-sentence, not to avoid conflict, but to close the curtain. 20 minutes later, an anonymous email hit my inbox. No subject, no name, just 2 words. "Watch this." Attached was a security camera clip from the office conference room, time-stamped 3 months ago. Verena stood near the whiteboard with her assistant. Her voice was clear. "Just delete her from the file. She won't notice." The footage was short, brutal in its simplicity. Not a heated argument, not a chaotic decision. Just casual sabotage delivered with the efficiency of someone who's done it before. I saved the video, attached it to an email to my lawyer with a simple line, "Proof of premeditated exclusion." Then I went to bed, slept like I hadn't in months. The following morning, I received a text from someone in compliance. We'd crossed paths during the quarterly audits. He was always professional, never friendly. "They're trying to frame the mismanagement on system errors. You should act fast." I didn't panic. I replied, "Let them scream. I'm giving them a stage." Within 24 hours, internal chatter turned into whispers. Staff exchanged glances in hallways, avoided eye contact in elevators. You don't have to say someone's guilty. Just let them start explaining things unprompted. I drafted a formal message to our top-tier partners, sent from my professional email, not personal. No threats, no accusations, just precision. Subject: Internal realignment, notification. Body: Due to recent restructuring measures and ongoing governance review, temporary access limitations have been implemented. We appreciate your continued partnership and will ensure transparency as systems are restored. No names, no drama, but everyone in the room would know. I made myself a coffee, opened the blinds, and watched the city morning unfold. Then I checked the company's social page. Verena had posted a statement blaming technical interruptions for financial processing delays. The comments were brutal. One person wrote, "I'd trust a vending machine over this leadership." Another, "Funny how the company's always reviewing but never explaining." She'd tried to bury me in silence. Now it was her silence being dissected publicly. I didn't need applause. I needed accountability. "They pushed me out of the boardroom," I said aloud, sipping my coffee. "I turned the building's lights off." The next time I saw my name, it wasn't in a family memo. It was in a lawsuit draft. The calendar invite hit my inbox at 7:08 a.m. the next morning. Subject: Emergency Family Session. Wells Holdings, Internal Governance. I was CC'd, not addressed. The kind of inclusion that says, show up but stay silent. The meeting was set for 1 p.m. at the Lake Oswego office. I arrived early, not because I needed time to prepare, but because I wanted them to see I wasn't hiding. The boardroom was full by the time I walked in. Verena sat at the head of the table, flanked by our mother Loretta and two longtime board members, David Graves and Elaine Connors. The family attorney, Mr. Halberd, stood awkwardly near the side, legal pad in hand, but no expression on his face. Verena started before I even sat down. "Her actions," she said, gesturing in my direction without naming me, "have jeopardized the liquidity of Wells Holdings, impacted payroll continuity, and severely undermined investor trust." Loretta nodded faintly, her lips pressed into a concerned line. No one else spoke. I took the open seat at the end of the table, quietly pulling a binder from my bag. She kept talking. "We've always managed internal affairs as a team, but unilateral decisions, especially those without proper consultation, create serious governance risks." I flipped open my binder, slowly. "Since we're all being transparent now," I said, my voice low but crisp. The room hushed. Verena stopped mid-sentence. I placed the first document on the table, Grandpa's notarized stock transfer, giving me 43% controlling interest. I didn't need to explain. The signatures spoke for themselves. Next, I pulled out a flash drive and passed it to Mr. Halberd. "There's a video file on there," I said, "from a security camera, dated 3 months ago." He inserted it into the laptop. The screen at the end of the table flickered to life. Verena's voice played clearly. "Just delete her from the file. She won't notice." Silence. Even Loretta looked down. I let the footage end before placing the third document on the table, a digital printout of Form 1083, co-signatory authority on all Wells Holdings accounts, activated by me under Grandpa's original trust. Verena started to speak, but this time, Elaine cut her off. "I think we've heard enough for now," she said. And then, I opened my phone and tapped play on a voice memo. Grandpa's voice filled the room, raspy but clear. "Don't let them redefine legacy. Legacy is who remembers your name when you're not in the room." No one moved. No one breathed. The clip ended in static. Verena sat still, one hand clenched into a fist under the table. I looked around once, then I spoke. "As of today, I've initiated a freeze on all discretionary family allocations and requested a third-party audit of the charitable foundation. Further misuse of personal identity or unauthorized asset leverage will be handled via civil recourse." No one responded. Mr. Halberd simply nodded and made a note. And I turned to Loretta. She looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Instead, her eyes filled, and she pressed a napkin to her mouth. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I said, standing. "I'm doing it because someone had to." I handed a copy of my statement to the attorney and tucked the rest of the binder back into my bag. As I walked out, I paused at the door. "You pushed me out of your rooms," I said, voice calm but cutting. "Now I own the doors." And the first door I closed was theirs. 2 days after the meeting, the front doors of Wells Holdings stayed locked past opening hours. An email had gone out at dawn. "Temporary closure, internal systems under audit." I didn't need to be told. I had written the draft myself. By noon, my inbox had 5 auto-forwards from the bank, each with the same line. "Pending withdrawal approvals, suspended until governance clarifies." That meant payroll was frozen, expense reports were stuck, Vendor payments bounced. Verena's name was struck from the authorized signature roster, a quiet, digital erasure. No one in the family called, not Ethan, not Uncle Ray, not even Loretta, until 3:17 p.m. when a single text came through. "This is too much. We didn't raise you to be cold." I stared at it, reread it twice, and deleted it without replying. It wasn't coldness, it was clarity. They had no idea how long it had taken me to stop apologizing for not letting them destroy me with grace. The next hit came the following morning. A major investment firm was about to finalize a $2.8 million injection into the company. Verena had been counting on it. It was the ace she intended to throw on the boardroom table and spin the narrative back in her favor. I didn't stop it with rage. I stopped it with a one-paragraph email to the compliance team at the firm, summarizing the lack of transparent oversight and the pending audit, both verified by external counsel. The deal collapsed within 18 hours. The internal thread leaked, of course. I saw the line in a screenshot texted to me by someone who used to intern under me. Althea Shipman blackballed the deal. No, I protected the integrity. They just never learned the meaning of that word. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment, a half-eaten salad in front of me and my phone face down on the kitchen counter. The silence was thicker than usual. Not heavy, not sad, just complete. A message came in from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Marshall Green. He used to work alongside Grandpa back when the company still felt like it had a soul. "I always knew you were the only one who didn't want anything but order." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. Instead, I stared at the screen and whispered, "Why did it take a collapse for them to say something real?" I got up, walked to my office, and opened the bottom drawer. Tucked under a stack of paperbacks was a photo I hadn't seen in over a year, Grandpa and me on the porch at the lake house. He had one arm around me, the other holding a fishing pole. I was maybe 10, barefoot, gap-toothed, proud as hell. That photo never made it into the family book. Verena said there were too many photos to choose from. Loretta said it must have gotten left out during the printing. They left out one picture, so I framed it. Hung it on the wall of my home office, right behind my desk. If they ever walk into this space again, and I doubt they will, I want the first thing they see to be what they chose to forget. They forgot my name. I made sure the contracts didn't. 3 weeks after the boardroom broke open like a fault line, the first formal audit report landed in every key inbox at Wells Holdings. I knew because I had already read it the night before, courtesy of the third-party firm I'd insisted on hiring. The document was straightforward. Over $480,000 had been funneled through the company's community development fund, with no formal documentation for where the money had gone. The fund had been under Verena's purview for the last 16 months. It wasn't just questionable, it was indictable. By noon, I'd sent an internal memo, locking all family members out of the fund's systems. The name Wells Family Foundation was retired. I refiled it under a new name, the Wells Initiative. A clean structure, independent board, zero family representation. The blow hit exactly where it was meant to. Loretta didn't call, Verena didn't write, but I knew they saw it. My silence had always traveled faster than their words. Later that day, I mailed a letter to every top investor, every long-standing partner. Effective immediately, all ongoing projects under the Wells Initiative will continue under new governance. Transparency, ethics, and nonpartisan oversight are now required pillars of this organization. At the bottom of the letter, just beneath my name, I added a quote. One Grandpa had scribbled into the corner of a napkin the week before he passed. Trust doesn't come from the name on a check. It comes from who signs it when no one's watching. Some investors pushed back initially. Old-school loyalty tends to die slow, but when they saw the documentation, when they saw the audit logs and legal validation, their tone shifted. A few offered polite apologies, most offered money. I declined both. That night, Verena received her own letter, courtesy of the board's legal team. Effective immediately, your discretionary privileges have been revoked pending full audit review. You are no longer authorized to represent the firm in any official capacity. I imagined her reading it alone in her condo, probably still in a tailored blazer, probably still blaming everyone but herself. At 8:22 p.m., Loretta called. Her voice wasn't angry this time. It was smaller, like wind moving through dried leaves. "It's all unraveling," she whispered. "You didn't have to do this." I didn't yell. I didn't even sigh. "You're right," I said softly. "I didn't have to. But I was the only one who could." There was a long pause. Then, a quiet click. She hung up. The next morning, I opened my LinkedIn app and drafted a post. Nothing emotional. Just this. When you're told you don't belong in the room, make sure your name is on the deed. I closed the app, made breakfast, and didn't check the response until after lunch. Over 300,000 views, tens of thousands of shares. Private messages from strangers who had been erased, rewritten, minimized. One message read, "You said what I've been trying to scream my whole life." A news station called later that week asking if I'd go on air. I thanked them and declined. I didn't need the spotlight. I had the structure. I sat by the window that afternoon, watching the city go on with its business. The same skyline I used to stare at from the passenger seat while Grandpa drove me to early morning board meetings just to learn how deals get done. He never said I'd be the one closing them, but he gave me the pen. They built a legacy of silence. I answered with structure. It was a Saturday, the kind of day meant for errands, laundry, and pretending to rest. I had just put the kettle on when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, Loretta. She stood there in a beige coat, arms full, not with gifts or flowers, but with a photo album I recognized and an envelope I didn't. I opened the door. She didn't smile, just nodded slightly and stepped in without waiting to be invited. "I won't stay long," she said quietly, setting the items on my kitchen island. There was a weight to her movements I hadn't seen before, less polished, more real. She ran her fingers across the album cover. "Your father would have been proud of what you built," she said, "just not of how we handled it." My instinct was to snap back, to remind her that how we handled it was the understatement of the decade. But I didn't. I just pulled 2 mugs from the cupboard and filled them with tea. She pushed the envelope toward me. "It's from Verena." I opened it slowly. The letter was short, just 2 paragraphs. "I never thought you'd actually follow through," it read. "That's on me. I guess I forgot you were always the one who paid attention while the rest of us performed." There was no warmth in her words, no ownership beyond what was legally necessary. I folded it in half, then in half again, and set it down without comment. "This isn't closure," I said. "It's a formality." Loretta didn't argue. She just looked down, turning the album pages as if she didn't know them by heart already. For several minutes, we sat in silence. Not the comfortable kind, not the angry kind either, just tired. Finally, she looked up and asked, "Do you think there's any way back?" I stirred my tea, let the spoon clink the side of the mug before I answered. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, "but that's different from trust." That was the moment something settled between us. Not reconciliation, not healing. Just a quiet acknowledgement that we were on opposite sides of something irreversible. When she stood to leave, I walked her to the door. She paused in the hallway, as if waiting for a hug that never came. I didn't shut the door immediately after her, but I didn't invite her back in either. There was something different in her eyes, and maybe, just maybe, in mine too. That night, I sat at my desk, opening the draft blog post I had never published. It was titled, "What Family Should Mean." I read through the opening lines, then erased them. In their place, I typed, "Family is who holds you accountable, not who holds you hostage." I hit publish. Within hours, messages poured in from strangers, emails, DMs, comments from people I didn't know, but somehow understood completely. "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." This hit harder than I expected. I feel less alone now. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I whispered to the quiet of the room. I didn't say it for them. I said it for me. Legacy was never about the name. It was about what you built when no one believed you could. The gallery was filled with polished wood, floor-to-ceiling windows, and people who had never once asked me if I was part of the real family. It was the official launch of the Wells Initiative, an event months in the making. The press was there, investment reps lined the walls, and a handful of nonprofit partners I respected stood near the back, coffee cups in hand. A single chair sat at the front of the stage, facing the audience. On it, a simple black and white card. Henry Wells. I walked onto the stage without a speech in hand. I didn't need one. I was asked why there's only one named chair here today. I began. That's easy. I paused, scanning the crowd. That was the only chair that ever deserved a name. Some people nodded. A few looked puzzled. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. Later that evening, after the crowd thinned and the last handshake had been exchanged, I stood by that chair, quiet. The noise behind me was applause, but in front of me was silence. And it felt right. I drove home that night without music on. The calm wasn't empty. It was earned. The next morning, I finalized the sale of the family's lake house, the same one where I'd spent every 4th of July as a child, where Grandpa taught me how to cast a line, where Verena had once hosted a legacy retreat she claimed was the cornerstone of our brand. I sold it for 1.5 times the market rate. The buyer didn't care about the history, just the location and the woodwork. That made the deal even sweeter. No announcements were made. No family group chats were alerted. No final tour was offered. I wired the proceeds into a new foundation account, registered independently. The Henry Wells Scholars Program, full scholarships for orphaned students pursuing financial literacy and public service. The dedication line in the foundation's charter read, "Legacy isn't inherited, it's built." Verena tried to get ahead of it, of course. She went to the press, said I'd dismantled tradition, misused heritage, and acted with personal bias. Her tone was polished, her words careful. She didn't know I'd already submitted a public archive of documents, notarized asset transfers, internal audit memos, emails, camera footage, and a spreadsheet of every dollar misappropriated under her leadership. I didn't release a statement. I didn't need to. A legal columnist summarized it best in an article 2 days later. In 15 years of corporate family litigation, I've never seen a cleaner takedown without a single raised voice. I kept my head down and got back to work. I closed every account that bore the family name, rerouted all investments through a separate entity. I kept nothing but what I'd earned, what Grandpa left, and what couldn't be touched by those who only showed up when things looked shiny. In my new office, I left the walls mostly bare. Except for one thing. A single photo. Me and Grandpa, sitting by the lake, legs dangling off the dock. He had his arm around my shoulder. I was holding a yellow folder, my first budget pitch, scribbled with crayon. No plaque, no caption, just presence. That photo had never made it into the family album, but now it lived on the wall that mattered. I leaned back in my chair, looking at it. I built something they can't touch, I said to no one, and I did it with everything they tried to erase. They wanted distance. I gave them legacy.